Have you ever wondered how you can raise money for your independent film? That's what we're talking about today. I speak with Daren Smith, indie producer, and we discuss all things financing. He talks about how he reaches out to investors, how he even finds the investors to begin with, and what he pitches to them to get them to finance his films. If you're curious to learn more, stick around for this deep dive conversation.
First question for you is when you first started, how did you actually find your first investor? Like what doors did you knock on? Where did you go to first to kind of figure out, okay, who should my first investors should be for this?
Yeah, when I first raised money, we're talking 10, 12 years ago on a project that a buddy of mine who was a co-owner of a business, we had a small boutique video film production company, and we had written a couple scripts, and we had one that we're like, this is it. This is the one that we're going to go raise money on. And I made the mistake. I didn't know it was a mistake at the time, but I made the mistake of let's go and talk to the people with money. And those people are venture capitalists, right? We just know like the term VC fund. It's like, oh, all these things just speak like oodles of money flowing out of their windows. Like, let's just go pick some up. So I went and did the rounds here in Utah. I mean, there's a lot of venture capital firms here in Utah. We have this moniker called Silicon Slopes because we're in the mountains instead of Silicon Valley out in California. So I'm doing the rounds and I'm meeting with all these venture capital firms, and they're all just like, this is awesome, but like, who let you in here? Like, why are we taking a pitch for a film? Like, we don't do that. We invest in startups and tech and that kind of stuff. And one of them even said we would get fired if we invested in a film. Like, that is outside of our mandate. And our LPs, which I didn't know what an LP was at the time, our LPs would like we would be booted out the building. It's like, okay, well, I obviously don't understand this world, so let me figure it out. But we did get connected to somebody, which was a nice thing that came from this whole rigmarole of like doing the rounds of the VC companies. One of them introduced us to a company, and they were looking to get into entertainment. They were looking to make some investments around music and film and entertainment and things like that. So we took a meeting with them and walked out the door with $150,000 invested in our movie. And it was like, okay, it's what it taught me really was you not only have to do the right amount of scale, like you can't just talk to three or five people and go, well, I didn't raise money, so that was a good attempt. You have to keep going until you raise the money. So whatever that looks like, it could be a dozen or 100 or 1,000 people that you have to talk to. But it also taught me that if you're speaking to the right person, it's a whole lot easier. Like the difference between a VC firm that's like, we would get fired if we invested in you and who let you in here versus a company that was actively looking to make investments in TV, film, music, media. It was night and day. And so it really honed my process into like, I only want to be talking to the people who value what I do, where there's a demand, an existing demand for what I am selling. Because if not, like the business of trying to convince people to invest in indie film is not a good business. But going out and finding those that are already looking for it, that can be a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. What I really liked about that is that I love that idea of going in and not even kind of knowing exactly what you're sort of doing and talking about, which I mean, that's I think a lot of people think like I have to know exactly how to do this in order, to order to have the conversation with these kinds of people. But there's so much of learning is just doing it. And so then with that, what were those kind of first pitches? I mean, eventually you were able to convince someone. So what was that angle you were kind of leaning on? Like, why should they invest in? I mean, like they said, like, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be pitching to us. So what was that kind of that angle that you're like, okay, this is why you should invest in films, and then obviously, why they said yes to that first 150.
Yeah, I don't think I had a good answer to why they should invest in indie films. I only had a good answer for this is what we're making, and if that's interesting to you, we'd love to take your money. Like it was a very naive approach or inexperienced approach to pitching. I talk up to especially directors a lot about this, but also producers and talking to them about what is the content of your pitch. And if you're stepping into the business of raising money, your number one priority is getting a return for your investors. Ideally, you get that return by making a really great film. But your number one goal and mandate really is to get a return to your for your investors. And I didn't know that back then. Again, 10, 12 years ago when I was first doing the rounds and pitching, I was just pitching saying, we're going to make this thing. Here's who we want to have in it. Here's the budget. Here's the timeline. Here's the story. And it was all the creative stuff. I honestly don't know why they invested in us. Maybe they were naive as well and they didn't really know what they were getting into. But this was that had done a lot of real estate development and investing. And the due diligence you have to do on those things, like you're measuring down to the square foot and you know what sort of occupancy rates there are, and you're doing a ton of due diligence to figure out how and when this investment you're making in a building, it will be profitable. And they didn't really do any of that with our movie, which was confusing. It's confusing now, not then. Back then, I was like, I did it. I had a passionate pitch and I did it well. And because I was a good person, like they gave us money. Like that was the extent of what I understood about pitching. But really, the metrics, the process that I've built to generate a return for investors. So, I'm raising a film fund right now. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but like I don't pitch the movies. I don't talk about the movies at all. And I've raised money from investors and they don't know what movies I'm going to produce. They know what types of movies, what genre, what types of movies, like they're family friendly, values based, but like I'm not pitching creative projects. I'm pitching a better structure for investing in indie films. And I can show them how, worst case scenario, we're break even, which means they're getting a return on their investment because of the way it's structured. So I've pivoted and learned over time that it's not about how passionate you are, how well you know the beats of the story. It's more when you're talking to people with money, you got to speak their language. And speaking about creative practices, speaking Latin, and then over here, they're speaking Finnish, which is the closest thing I can think of when financial Finnish, those are the same, right? So you got to be able to speak their language.
It's a huge problem that I think a lot of people run into. It's just that you're so used to your own sort of nomenclature and how you talk creatively about filmmaking and what you're doing that when you don't even realize you're talking to someone who has one may not even realize film is an asset to begin with. That is something
Hmm.
you can actually invest in and it could potentially give them a return. And then on top of that, most people don't even know how a film is made. So it's like you've got to have to really go back to that ground zero. And I like that instead of trying to teach them how what a film is and the creative this and that, just go right into, like you said, their language. And I get, once you kind of can hook them in with their language, then it's like, okay, now along that process, we can talk about the films and actually talk about the creative if they are interested. But you've got to begin with that first part of just, okay, I understand you and what your needs are, and here's how we're going to go about that. So that kind of that leads into that next part. So you have a film fund as opposed to a singular film, which I
Yeah.
imagine has its own challenges as well. And then so I kind of want to first ask about that. Is like, why did you choose to go instead of going kind of tackling away film by film and to say, you know what, let's go to this, which I feel like is an equally massive challenge, and say, okay, let's just try to raise a bigger chunk of money to diversify across a slate of films. So what made you choose that route?
Yeah, raising $1 million for a movie was just not hard enough, and so I decided to raise 10 million for 10 movies all at once. No, I don't want to be too facetious here, but we got to have fun with this stuff. It can't be so serious and hard and arduous, or else that affects our mindset. So, really, what happened is I've done four movies over the last 4 years, and I started as a line producer, and then I was line producer UPM, and became producer of the last three films. And really, what I learned across those four films is that the indie film model, as it exists now, at least in the States, because I don't know about other countries, but the model that we used across those four films is a broken model. It's a bad model for investors. It's the model is, if I were to describe it really quickly, and everyone will kind of know what this feels like, is like you raise as much money as you humanly possibly can in as quick a time as possible. And then as soon as you get enough to where you can pay yourself close to a living wage, you go, great, we have enough. We're greenlighting the movie. The next Monday, you're in pre-production and you're hiring people. despite whether it's the first draft of the script or the 100th draft of the script. So there's no development anywhere in there. It's 100% equity, and so it's a bad financial structure. You rush into production because you've only got so much time and so many dollars and so much runway, so you got to get moving fast. You rush through the edit and post, and you're scraping by because you probably overspent during production, and you're begging and scraping to get deals or to get people to give you a little bit more money for finishing funds. And then you go, great, the movie's done. Now what do we do? And you go, oh, well, it'd be really great to find a distributor. So how do we do that? Well, we go to film festivals. And so you scrounge up a couple $100 to submit to a bunch of festivals, and you hope that you get into a festival. You hope that someone there likes the movie. You hope that they are a member of some distribution company, and you hope that they want to make you an offer, and you hope that that offer is more than you spent on the movie. Like, there's so much hope in that strategy, and it's a terrible model. What leads to most indie films aren't profitable. Like, you can look at all the statistics and go, yeah, it's really hard in indie film to break even. And I looked at that and said, well, I don't think it's because the films are bad. I don't think it's because we're making bad product, although the model does generate subpar or suboptimal product in my mind because you're skipping development, you're rushing through production, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you do get a distribution deal, then you got to go and raise more money for the marketing and distribution. It's like, oh, the model's so broken. And so I'm very much a systems thinker. I like architecture and systems and processes and optimization. Those are like candy to my brain, right? And so my dopamine gets super fired up when I see a broken system and I can go instantly, let's optimize these weak constraint points and let's fix this thing. And so over about a year and a half, from 2023 to the end of 2024, I just created this different model. And I said, what if film looked more like VC? What if I could create a film fund to invest in films? And then I could dictate a lot of the things that I saw as broken in the other model. So what if we forced people to spend 3 to 6 months on development and we gave them 10% of the production budget for that purpose? Well, that would probably lead your movies, and you'd have more time to prep and to get ready and to build your storyboards and your shot list. I mean, we're bleeding into pre-production here, but even then, it's like, what if we did a bunch of read-throughs? What if we did an animatic version of the movie and made it first, go and film it? Like, what if we did, like, stole some of the things from that Pixar model? Then it became, okay, well, what if we made sure that every movie had an appropriate budget, right? Somewhere in the $1 to $1.5 million range. You can do a lot on that budget. That's how the 4 films I've done are $1 to $2 million range, and you can do a lot with that much money. And then what if we raised the money for marketing up front? And what if we had the distribution locked in before we even go and greenlight the movies? And what if we had partners for international sales and streaming? And what if we had sponsors lined up already? What if we set up a 501(c)(3) so that we could take donor money? What if we had sponsors? What if we had partners for marketing and distribution? All this stuff. And so I spent a year and a half forging all of those partnerships to where I have all of that. And now I can go and say to a writer director or to an investor, hey, bring your project into the fund and let's do it this way. Or to an investor, hey, the same $1 million you would have invested in one film and you would have been 100% equity on the hook for 100% of the funding. What if you spread that same amount over 10 films? So you had diversification, so that you had more chances for a movie to break out and to do really well and to resonate with an audience. And what if you got this compounding effect over 10 films because we're serving the same audience over these 10 movies? So they're at some point, whether it's movie 2 or 3 or 10, they're going to go, oh, this company makes this type of movies and I like it and I can take my family to go see it and it's not another DreamWorks Pixar Illumination thing. Okay, cool. There's a lot of upside there. And so I spent a year and a half figuring out, how do I cover the downside? And part of that is limiting the budgets to like that $1 to $1.5 million range. And then the rest was, okay, well, let's find really good movies that resonate with this audience that we're trying to serve, and let's see how it goes. And so that was a long answer, but we can dive into any of it. But that's really what I saw. I saw a broken model. I saw a better way. and decided, well, I can either keep operating under this broken model or I can go do it my way.
Yeah, I mean, I I love the depth of that answer, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot there to take in, and it makes a lot of sense. And also, there's a couple. I mean, I'll pinpoint a couple things that very quickly, and then I want to have a questions off of it. But I love that one thing that I think is so important that you said there. All of that is that you looked at you looked at systems and structure, and you say, okay, let me take my time to figure out. Okay, this model does kind of work, and I like it, but how can I do it better? And you took
Yeah.
that time, which is so important to figure out what that system is and then put that model together. And you said it took you a year and a half. And I think that patience and drive to do that is so important as opposed to okay, well, you know what, I want to do a fund and I'm just going to dive right in. I know I'm going to make 5 movies, and it's like okay, what's the difference? Then it's like I'm just going to finance 5 movies together, and call it a fund. But you actually took that effort and time to say, okay, but how will this fund really work? And I think that's so important for any producers listening to figure out, okay, that whatever steps you're going to take, whatever process you're going to take, we're all eager to get our things made and done, but create systems and figure out those processes to really make it work. Like we truly understand that roadmap you're taking. Okay, so now though, with everything you just broke down there, what it's really was very much on the producer and building side of it. Now I want to kind of look at it from the investor side of it now. So when you have that kind of model, so when you have a singular film, you can it's much easier, I think, to break down and explain. Okay, here's how you could potentially make money, and in the time frame that will happen. Now you have a film fund, and you have a much different ROI sort of strategy and time frame, right? Because you're not giving out all the money like with the first film. It has to be that sort of payout has to be diversified across all the films in the whole slate. So a couple questions here. This how when you talk to these investors, I get the concept of what you're pitching them, but the question really is, how long do you tell them that this is going to take? Like this is a 3 to 7 year return. This is how you'll see those returns over this many films. Because each film will take time, right? And so what is that kind of their exit strategy? What's that exit for them? And then do they know like, okay, you're coming in now, but it's going to be this length of time, and this is why, and this is how you get paid out over that. Can you dive into some of that stuff?
Yeah, there's kind of two parts of this answer. One is high level and one is more granular, so we can get nerdy about it if we want to. So, high level, when you're talking about a fund, it's a 10-year fund. And the way that that's structured is there's a 3-year investment period, 3.5-year investment period, and a 9-year recoupment period. So it overlaps. It's not 3.5 plus 9. It's like starting in year 2, they should start seeing returns from the first investment. So that's the high level. And you talk about things like IRR, which is internal rate of return, and we're targeting a 33% IRR over those 10 years of the fund, which means they're looking at like 33% return each year if you annualize it or stretch it out over those 10 years. So how does that actually work though? So up front, you're not just taking $10 million and putting it in your own bank account. So that's one of the unique things with the fund structure. If you were financing a slate, for example, you'd go say, we're going to raise 5 million to do 5 movies, and you'd go get 5 million and put it in your bank account. But like, are you doing all 5 movies at the same time? Because I can't do that. I can do one at a time, which is like 3 a year. So happens when you set up a fund is when you make each individual investment, you do what's called a capital call. So front, they're committing capital, and then when you make the investment, it's called a call. And so if I get $10 million committed, for example, by January, which is how long I have to raise this fund based on the structure of how it's set up. It's like, okay, so I have $10 million committed. I don't actually have any of that in my bank account. So I go, all right, let's greenlight the first 2 projects and put them into development and pre-production, depending on where they're at. It's like, okay, I'm going to call $2 million of the 10. So at that moment, those investors will give whatever percentage, 10% of their investment. So if they put in 20K, they're going to send $2,000. If they put in 2 million, they're sending over $200,000. And then I end up with 2 million in the fund. And at that point, I make 2 separate investments, one into fund or movie 1 and one into movie 2, and those each get $1 million. And so those are normal film investments. You're investing in an LLC. It's ownership. The investors are going to get their money back plus 20% before any split with the filmmakers, etc. But it's the very same time, it's a very similar timeline to what you typically tell people. 18 months is a good like ballpark, right? We're going to do 6 months of development, making the movie and editing, and 6 months of getting it ready for market. And then we start seeing money come in. So that's a good ballpark. So if we're making investments January of 2026, we could realistically start seeing revenue middle of 2027. So that's why there's a 9 year recoupment period. And so for that first capital call, the money is going to start coming in 18 months later. But their 10th capital call for the 10th movie is on year four. And that is going to have the same timeline of 18 months to 2 years to start seeing revenue. But at that point, my hope is that they're playing with house money at that point. They've made their money back on films one, two, three, four, five, and they can just reinvest it into film 10. So ultimately, they put $1 million in instead of 2 million, but they ultimately invested $2 million into the fund, if that makes sense. So it's not a rolling fund, it's not a syndicate thing, it's a venture capital style fund that's set up and administrated the same way. But those are all the reasons why it makes a lot more sense for an investor, because they're not just giving me $1 million up front. They're giving me $1 million over 10 films over a 3.5 year investment period. And that means they get to hold on to their money for longer in their accounts, making money for them instead of sitting in my account, making money for me.
Yeah, yeah, because that makes so much sense, and I like that. I mean, that process makes a lot of sense, and I think that's yeah, I'm hoping that can really help some producers understand, even if they don't do a fund, just kind of understand, if they even take their time and spread out how to making their movie, how to even bring in that funding. So I have another question here with that, and then I want to jump into a kind of guide off the side. So when you okay, how this one the do you have like a minimum amount for your investors, right? So are you trying to find a minimum buy-in, and then because I'm guessing your goal would be, obviously you would, it would be work better if you had one investor with 10 million. But um, do you have, is there a sort of a minimum amount you're looking for? And then why do you choose that amount?
That's a really good question. So a lot of people say, like, yeah, don't you want just one investor at 10 million? I was like, I've actually had people say, look, if you wanted to do 50 million, we could do that, but 10 million is too small. And I say, well, I'm not ready for you yet. I'll call you in 5 or 10 years, because having one investor do the whole amount gives them a lot more leverage than I would like. Even though legally and structurally I have the ability to make the decisions, they still control their money, right? And if they're 100% of the fund and decide to pull out or decide to change their mind or whatever it is, like I'm in hot water. So I set it up to where there's a minimum of four, like the most I could take from an investor. And this is a personal mandate. It's not anything legally or structurally in the documentation of the way the fund's set up. It's just more of a personal values kind of constraint of I'm not going to take more than 2.5 million from one single investor. And so the target that I'm looking at are like the 500K to $2.5 million checks. Those are like your executive producer, co-executive producer level investors. That said, I had a lot of bringing in angel investors, so the people that write checks in the $10 to $50,000 range, because part of the intent, part of the vision for this fund is to create more film investors, not just for myself, but for the industry at large. And so this is why I'm talking about this on podcasts and webinars and interviews. Like, I don't care if people credit me with the idea of like doing this thing. I probably didn't come up with it. It just worked for me. But it's not about how do I capture as much value as possible. It's like, no, let's just make the industry work for as many people as possible, because the industry's broken right now. You see all of our institutions failing all over the place or consolidating or whatever. That's a whole topic for a different conversation. But ultimately, I have taken money as low as 10,000. That's the minimum that I set it at. So a unit of the fund is $10,000 and there's 1,000 units available. I think that maths properly, right? 10,000 times 1,000 is 10 million. You can check me later on the math. But I want to create more film investors. And there are people that have come in at 10 or 20 or $30,000 who I know could come in at 500K or a million, but they've never done it before. So they're going, well, let's see how this goes. But guess what's going to happen on fund two when I'm ready to raise the next fund and it's a 25 or a $50 million fund and we're making movies that are 2.5 to $5 million instead. Guess who's going to be first in line because they put in 30 and they wish they'd put in 2 million because of the returns. So that's what I'm building towards is the real long-term game of let's use this fund not only to get 10 movies made, but let's build an audience. Let's build an indie film studio. Let's build a pool of investors who are making money, who are talking about this, who are telling their friends, so that by the time I have fund two ready to launch, I send an email to my 2 or 3 thousand investors on an email list and go, fund two is open. Click here to let me know how much you'd like to commit. And I got 10 or 20 or 30 million raised off a single email. That's what I'm building towards. But you have to see it as a 3 to 4 year game to that you're building towards because that doesn't happen overnight. And so to wrap this up, like the on one end of the spectrum, you have a single investor at $10 million. On the other end of the spectrum, you have what Angel Studios just did, or Angel just did. They raised $55 million from a crowdfunding, like a crowd equity funding, over 18 days from over 40,000 investors, as low as like $400 or $500. Right? I don't have the audience of millions of people to get 40, 50,000 people to invest 500, 1,000, whatever dollars. So you have to find where your sweet spot is on that spectrum. And it's a function of how much can you get from individual investors and also how many people can you actually enroll in the process. Because if your list, like I've got probably 300 emails of investors on a spreadsheet right now that I've talked to or messaged or connected with in some way, shape, or form. I think to raise this fund, I'm going to have to talk to 1,000. And so I'm doing it every day. I've got multiple meetings every single day. But if I can reach 500 to 1,000 people, I'm not going to get 40,000 investors to give me $500 each. It's $55 million in 18 days. Like it's insane what they pulled off, but they built toward that out for 10 years. So yeah, maybe someday down the line, 10 years from now, we open up fund three to, I think the cap is $75 million. So it's like, yeah, that would be amazing. But I certainly don't have millions of people who know that my company exists and that they can invest in it. So you start with the network you have, the audience you have, the connections you have. And if you don't have the people that can write you 500,000 to $2.5 million checks, then that's where you start. You start building those relationships. You go to where they are, you connect with them, you have lunch with them, you invite them to events, whatever it is, so you can get those investors to come in.
Amazing, amazing. And that's actually a perfect segue into what I want to dive into next, which is sort of where they come from, and how you go about finding them. I mean, because I think that's the what I want to rewind first to say this is that I love that what you said there is that I plan on reaching out to 1,000 investors. I mean, I love like that's what's so important. One like back to the two things that I feel like you said that are just so crucial is way back when you said I spent a year and a half putting this together, so your systems and understanding the
Hmm.
process and the time to put it together. So that's amazing. And then number two, like okay, so now you spend all that time and that patience to create systems. And now what you want to look at is okay, now I got to find investors. And I know that's not going to come from 5 phone calls or 5 meetings. That's going to come from 1,000 over the course of a couple of years. And that
Yeah.
money may trickle in here or there. And obviously someone doing a fund versus a film is a different thing. You don't want money to trickle in here and there over 2 years when you're making a film. But so you say, okay, well, I've got to reach out to 1,000 people in like 4 months as opposed to 2 years. So but then that goes to this next part, which is that, so what is your process of finding, I guess, first finding the investors, how do you even find them? Because that's obviously a question people have all the time. It's like, well, how do you find people? So what's your first process of finding investors? And then after you do that, what is your next step with them? How do you take them from that, I've now located this person into this first conversation with them?
Yeah, I love thinking of everything in their terms. Like there's a great book called Demand Side Sales 101. I forget the name of the author, but if you just type in demand side sales, you'll find it. And what it what it does is it shifts your mind from here's what I have to sell and how do I find people who want to buy it to what are people already looking for and where are those people, right? And hopefully then you can build a product to meet the existing demand as opposed to trying to force your product on a marketplace and create demand out of thin air. Like I've found very little success in that. I said earlier, I'm not in the business of trying to convince people to invest in indie film. I'm doing a little bit of that. I'm creating tension around investing in indie film with my writing and podcasts and appearing on things and speaking and stuff. And that generates some demand, but not enough to like raise a fund. So question one is like, as far as location, where to meet them? Well, where are the people with money already hanging out? I mean, you can ask ChatGPT and it'll give you a whole bunch of answers, which is pretty awesome. So one of the things is like looking at high net worth individuals. What are the conferences? What are the events? What are the meetups? What are the lunch things? Like, what are the things locally that are happening where those people are showing up? Because first of all, we're all just people. So that like has to be a mindset shift in everybody. Like if they're a billionaire, they're still just people and they like going to lunch and they like barbecue or they like tacos or they like pizza. And so I literally messaged billionaires that I've met and said, "Hey, so real important question for you. Are you a fan of lunch?" And they go, "Yeah, I love lunch." It's like, "Great, me too. What kind of lunch do you like?" And we start there, right? So I'm getting into the conversation, but location first. They like going to lunch. They like going to events that there might be opportunities for them, whether it's to connect with other people, learn something new, experience something new. So you can either go to where they already are, or you can create opportunities for them to come and be a part of it and get something out of it. So, for example, location wise, I like things on the end of the spectrum where I have a lot of control over it as opposed to I have very little control. So, let's talk about the little control first. There's a group here, for example, called Reference Group in Utah. Friend Tyler Jennings set this up a year or two ago. And he has, multiple times a month, he'll get together and there's 100 to 200 people that attend now every one of these events. He'll find a sponsor to provide lunch for everybody. It's pizza or Chick-fil-A or something like that. And then he interviews, he's basically doing a live podcast with a founder. And in Utah, like I said, we have Silicon Slopes here. So there's a big community of founders, CEOs, investors, advisors, venture capital funds. Like all these people go to these events because they don't know who they're going to meet. They might meet a founder. They might hear about an opportunity to invest in something. They might XYZ, whatever it is. So every time I've gone to one of these, I've met somebody, and maybe they're a CMO, maybe they're a founder, maybe they're an investor. It varies every time. I have very little control over who's in the room, who I get to talk to, whether or not I have a minute with them or 5 minutes with them. I don't have control over the volume or the vibe or anything in the room. So it's very low control, but there's a lot of surface area for luck. Let's put it that way. Because you don't know who you're going to bump into or who you're going to see, who they're going to introduce you to. Every time I go, I'm meeting someone new through an invitation because I know somebody and they go, "Do you know so and so?" "Oh, awesome. No, I don't. Let's meet." So that's like that end of the spectrum. Go to places where they're already hanging out, even if you don't have a lot of control over the outcome. Serendipity reigns on that end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have curated events that you are putting together yourself. And I'm a big, big fan of events for a number of reasons. I'll try to hit all of them. I don't know how many reasons there are, but I'm going to try to hit a lot of them. So with an event, you get to curate, you get to craft the experience for the people that are coming. So, for example, this is my best example, but I've done a handful of these. In January this year, we had two things going on at the same time that really lended itself the timing of this to host an event. Sundance Film Festival, within an hour of my house here in Utah. And at the same time, we had what's called Utah Tech Week, which is literally a week of events for founders, investors, VC people, etc., to get together and play ping pong or have roundtable discussions or go to dinner or whatever it might be. Anybody can create an event and put it on their site. And then it's an opportunity for people to just see, like, oh, here's 150 events this week around Utah Tech Week, right? So I saw that opportunity and went, man, I should really host an event. So I came up with this Utah Film Investor Summit. And it made a lot of sense for everybody that I was messaging because it's like, oh, it's during Utah Tech Week, Utah Film Investor Summit. Those two things go together. They match. That's a meal and an entree or an entree and an appetizer or whatever. Like they go together. It's the same cuisine. And people coming into town. I had an opportunity to meet with people from New York, from LA, from Austin, from Atlanta, from all over the country who came to me, right? And so I had a Utah Film Investor Summit. I had 150 people RSVP, and the bulk of them were investors, founders, and people in the industry. 65 people showed up, and I was able to give a 10-minute presentation about my fund. I hosted a little roundtable discussion about the opportunities in indie film. And then the rest of the night was a really cool opportunity we hosted it at the Utah Film Studios. So there are these world-class studios that like Yellowstone was filmed at, and like there's three big stages. And, it's this building on the side of the road as you're driving into or past Park City that 99% of the people who have driven past that have no idea what's in there. So for an investor who's never invested in film, how do you get them to come to your event? Well, have it somewhere cool and say, we're going to do a tour of a world-class film studio. So I had a lot of people show up just for that. And I was, a bonus. I was the crackers on the side or the salt and pepper. I wasn't the main dish. But they still got to meet me. I got to meet them. And what's almost the most important aspect of this is I had 150 people RSVP. I had a mentor one time tell me that the fortune is in the follow-up. And so the night wasn't about pitching. It really was about, here's an opportunity. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what's exciting to me. But I'm not here to say, how much do you want to commit right now? That wasn't the pitch. The pitch was, if you're interested, get in touch. But guess what? I had all their emails, even the ones that didn't show up. So the next 2 months was me following up with 150 people who explicitly said they were interested in this thing. The same number, 150 people here versus 150 people at the reference group meetup, maybe 5 of the people at reference group are aligned with the mission and values and the vision of what I'm trying to do. Over here, out of the 150, there's probably 100 to 120 of those 150 that are aligned, or else I wouldn't have invited them. So you have a lot more control about who you can connect with. And it's such an easier pitch to say, hey, I'm hosting an event called the Utah Film Investor Summit. It's at the Utah Film Studios. We're doing a tour. My buddy Ryan's going to play some music and there's free drinks. Come and hang out and meet cool people. That's way lower pressure than, hey, I'm raising a Phil fund and I would like to talk to you about investing in it.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I love
that's
that.
the strategy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. I mean, that's fantastic. And, you know, I mean, if you only have one option, I mean, go where they are. If you can't create your own thing, of course, I love that. I mean, you just like you started with thing that's out of your control, but but no matter what, just take whatever efforts you have to take. So go where they are if you can't bring them to you. And I'm sure some people will be like, well, how I can't put together a giant event during a film studio, at a film studio or something cool and exciting. But no matter
Not with
what,
that attitude.
exactly right. But no matter what, though, there's always something in your town or city, or maybe you live somewhere small, but maybe you're an hour drive away to something, right? You
Yeah.
may not be, it doesn't have to be right then and there. At where you specifically live, you could, drive somewhere, go somewhere, reach out to, a small little film studio wherever you are and things like that. And then say like,
Yeah.
look, I want to put together this event. And I like that, you just, the name is right on the surface. Like this is the Film Investor Summit. This is
Right.
not, we're not, don't, you're not trying to lure them in with something else. Like this is what we are here and talking about,
Yeah.
you know,
So really quick, I should extend this to what I'm about to do next month because I think it applies to this part of the conversation. I'm going to 3 separate back-to-back film festivals in October. I'm going to Newport Beach, AFI Fest in LA, and then the Austin Film Festival. So I've never been to any of them, but I'm not just buying a pass and going and showing up and sitting in a screening and standing in the lobby and hoping that somehow that turns into $1 million investment. That's very low leverage, low control. There's zero control in that situation. So what am I doing instead? Right now, 30, 45 days out, I'm every day messaging 10 to 50 people in those specific locations in the industry or adjacent to the industry, meaning they're investors in alternative assets or things like that. I'm like each week I'm messaging between 150 and 250 people and saying, I'm going to be at these film festivals and I'm hosting a private dinner to talk about the opportunities in indie film. And if you like come, it's not a pitch event. Everybody's buying their own meal. You know, I'm raising money. I'm not spending money right now. So like it's a fun way to say I'm not buying you $100 dinner. But if you want to come and be a part of a really cool curated event, I'm hand selecting 10 to 12 people to come and have lunch or have dinner and have a conversation. And for people that are at a festival, what do they want? To be invited to cool private events. There's nothing in the world that says I'm not eligible to do that or I'm not allowed to. Like I can go to LA during a film festival and say, "Hey, if you're also in LA, I'm hosting this thing and you should come. I'm personally inviting you to be one of the 12." The response rate on that is like 40%. Like when I reach out to people, 40% of them get back and say, "That's really cool. Yeah, let me know details." And so what happens is if I message 200 people and 40% get back, whatever the math is on that, 246, it's 80
80.
people. And I only have room for 12. Well, now I get to hand select the 10 or 12, or I could host 2 or 3 dinners, or like I'm 100% in control of that event. And it's very high leverage. So I can say, look, I want at least 6 women in the room. I want at least 8 or 10 of the 12 to be investors. All right, like I can do whatever I want because I have created the demand for the thing that hasn't yet happened. And then I can say, well, I'm in charge, so I can do what I want. And so at each one of these locations, Newport Beach, LA, and Austin, I'm hosting one, two, three. I don't know how many I'm going to host. It depends on demand. But if there's 100 people that want to come, you better believe I'm going to host more than one. And guess what? If they express demand because they put their email in and said, I'll be at Austin and let me know, I have their email address. So I can follow up with them afterwards if they make it or not. So by the end of that 3 week period, I'll have spent an hour at least with probably 50 to 100 people. So that's leverage because it's at scale. It's not one on one, it's 10 or 1 to 12 at a time. But I'm also going to walk out with 100 plus email addresses for follow up through the rest of the year. So all of that tends to build momentum, and the more leverage you have, the more it compounds. So like it's not just a one-off event that I did in January. This is an ongoing strategy that I'm using every month. I mean, I'll probably host another lunch in November when I get back from all these festivals to do one here in Utah. So it's an ongoing thing, and you just keep going until it works. Like that's the ultimate strategy is like don't stop after one. You might need to do 5 or 10 or 20, but keep going until you have what you need, which is in my case $10 million.
Oh, I love this so much. There's so much to unpack there, and I don't even know where to begin because it's so amazing. Um, but so I want to try to say all the few things there that I love that I want to call out, shout out to. Is one is that so important that you're hosting an event, but you're not. But I love that you're not saying like I am creating and paying for an event. You're literally just almost like calling a restaurant like I'm gonna book. I want to just book a table for 12 people
Yeah.
and then everyone's going to pay for their own dinners. And then you just reframe that to I'm hosting an event, which is wonderful, right?
Yeah.
So that's great. So you've hosted an event with spending very little money, which is so important. Like you said, you don't have. I mean, you're trying to make the money, you can't start spending it. So that's so important. So what can you do? I love that. What can you do that sounds exciting and can bring people together on the smallest budget? And that's really amazing. And you're doing it, like you said, in the territory where people will already be and hanging out. Number
Yeah.
two, I love that you've sort of created this great FOMO as well, because you have this reach out and you say, I can only have 12, 15 people. So even in that, your strategy can be, it's like, hey, let me know because there may be a wait list starting soon, even though you already know there's a wait list in essence. So they're like, oh, well, there's going to be a wait list. Maybe I just want to go ahead and you know, get on this, get into this. So 40%, first of all, 40% response rate is incredible. Number one, just anyway. So that's really great. And then to get people interested and signed up, and then you can like create that FOMO effect of like, don't miss out. People are already trying to sign up already. And then, like you said, you've got those group of people there you talk to, but then you also now you have all the people who aren't going to come or that you choose not to invite, though you still have their contact. Doesn't mean they're not worthy to speak to. That's what I love about that. You will obviously speak with them at some point. They just didn't come to that event you hosted, but you can speak with them. So there's so much there that that one little thing can give you so much traction to work with on an ongoing basis. I mean, that already they would give you so many hours of effort to put in that you could just get what you need. And I'm not thinking, I'm just thinking like just an independent producer producing one film. It's like you just do that. And if you have 100 names right there that you can work with and 40% response rate, like right there alone, it can get you hopefully what you're trying to go if you're looking at that $1 million, even $500,000 kind of micro budget.
Yeah.
So the next thing, that also too, this will go to the question, and I love this, that you're not there really pitching. You're more of there building trust in a relationship, which is so
Yeah.
important. I think that's a huge key. Is that everyone wants to just pitch. I mean, it's almost like LinkedIn posts. You see, like someone's like, I've got a screenplay. Anybody want to invest? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know
Like, I
you.
don't know you, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like that, it really is like a relationship. I mean, it's like you got to take them on the date first, and you are. You
Yeah.
take them on the date, and we're not talking about marriage yet. We're just having a good time talking about interests, and that's what you're
Yeah.
doing with that first hosting. So now you've done that, and you've had that great first date with your investors, and you're hosting these events. What is that next step now? I mean, you have your follow up with those specific people. So we'll ignore for a minute the other people that are interested that couldn't make it, but now that core audience, the core investors, let's call them, that you had that first sort of date host a meeting with. What is that next step with them?
So in the follow-up, hey, I'll separate them if I can into two groups, one that attended the event and one that didn't attend the event, because I don't want to do the same messaging for both. If they came to the event, oh my gosh, thank you guys so much. Last night was incredible. We did this, remind them of the highlights. We did this, we did this, we did this. Picture, picture, picture. Because I'm going to take 5 or 7 pictures through the night just so that I can put it in an email the next day in a follow-up. So make sure you just capture a few pictures. You don't need to hire a photographer. You don't need this big old thing. Just 5 pictures from your phone is enough for an email. So you send photos, you send a recap, and you them of the high that they had the night before. Hopefully it was a good event. And they're going, oh yeah, that was amazing. Oh, I'm so glad to be connected to this person. Now they know how to contact you because you're sending the email, so they can just hit reply. But in that email, I will say something along the lines of, this is what I'm working on right now, and I would love to have a conversation with you if to see if there's a fit. Maybe you'd want to sponsor, maybe you'd want to invest, maybe you'd want to donate, maybe you'd want to get involved somehow. Whatever it might be, let's hop on a call. Click here or hit reply and we'll get it scheduled. And I'll put a link to my calendar so they can go straight to my calendar, schedule an event, schedule a call, or they hit reply and they go, Daren, thanks so much. Last night was a blast. My wife was, or my husband was, whatever. That's going back a step. Always, if you're doing these kind of events, um, men especially get invited to these evening things a lot. If you can craft an event that makes it something where they can bring their wives to, they plural, wives plural, not they singular, wives plural, right? So that individual men can bring their individual wives to. You have to clarify in Utah, it's a thing. So create opportunities for them to have a nice night out with their spouse, and that's another reason they might attend your event. So back to this. I send one email to those that came, reminder of how great the night was. And remember, we talked about this. I briefly mentioned that I'm working on a film fund. Here's more info if you're interested. And if you'd like to have a conversation, here's a link to schedule a call. That's my email to those that came. Those that didn't come, it's a very similar email. I'm saying, hey, I'm so sad we missed you last night. Here's what you missed. FOMO, 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 FOMO. It's all about you should have been there, you big dummy. Like I want them to feel like, whoa, I really missed out. Next time Darren emails me about an event, I'm going because this looks awesome. Look at the guy who was playing music. Look at the drinks. Look at the event space. Look at the there are 80 people there. Holy cow. I should have gone. You want them to think, man, I really should have gone to that. It's a bummer because then they're going to show up to the next one. And then it's a very similar thing, but with a little more context. Last night we had this, great event. These things happened. They were able to do this stuff. I also shared a little bit about what I'm working on with Producer Fund One. Let me share a little bit with you real quick. It's a $10 million fund, do the next 10 movies, blah, 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 blah. If you would like to learn more about it, here's a link, here's calls, hit reply, let me know, right? So it's the same call to action. I want to get those people on a call. So at every event, what I'm doing is I'm downloading the list of people who RSVP'd. I'm putting them into my email software and I'm putting them into a spreadsheet. And so from each event, I will have a spreadsheet that I can say, okay, I sent an email to everybody. Okay, they they scheduled a call. We had the call. They're either interested or not, right? It's a tracking sheet with 5 or 6 steps, and that's the work for the next month or two after an event is to go, okay, let me make sure that I can have a conversation with every single person that I possibly can. You're never going to have 100%. So if you have 150 people on an email list, you're not going to have 150 conversations. That's unrealistic. Half of them aren't even going to come to the event. So now you're down to 65, and half of those you might be able to have a conversation with. But if you're having a conversation a day, that's going to keep you busy for the next month. And you may have 5 or 10 people in that list that are like your dream scenario partners, whether they're investors or collaborators or whatever. Guess what? You're going to follow, you meet with them, or they say, stop bothering me, you weirdo. Right. So, hey, so glad to meet you at the event. Sorry we didn't have more time to chat. What's next week look like for you for a quick call? Hey, sorry I missed you last week. Would love to hop on a call this week. What's your schedule? Third, hey, let me know if you're not interested, but I'd love to hop on a call this week, or I'm happy to come to you and we can do lunch. Like it's informal, it's one sentence, it's a quick, easy reply, but I follow up 3, 4 times before I give up on any one investor.
No, I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, again, like, what I love about all this is that's so important is that everything is a process. It's a process, it's a
Yeah.
process, it's a process, and it's a slow process. And that's the important part. None of this is rushed, and none of it can be rushed because the moment you rush it, it's easy to just kind of scare someone and they back away very quickly.
Yeah.
And what else? So you've kind of so, and even now you haven't even. What I like about this too, which is so interesting, what I want to what I hope people take away from this is that you haven't even begun pitching, really, actually pitching your fund yet. You've gone through all the steps, right? And you haven't even begun. Like, okay, now we are ready to have that real conversation. So you have, you've got they meet you and you have an event, so you meet in person, whatever, you have a follow-up, you have a conversation, just you're gauging interest. So, and so these all these things are happening and you still haven't pitched yet. So now when do we get to that stage? So now you feel like, okay, now you're seeing, okay, real interest, right? You've kind of moved them
Yeah.
along the line and you're filtering away the people that are obviously not showing interest. So is this the stage you're like, okay, now let's get into that first real talk?
Yeah. I think the way I see it is maybe a little different. So I think it's worth clarifying. I think you're always pitching. So the pitch is an event, and then you're pitching attending the event, and then you're pitching getting on a call, and then you're pitching setting up the call, and then you're pitching on the call. So you're always pitching. So it's not like I'm intentionally delaying the actual pitch for a set time in the future. I'm always ready to pitch. So if I'm at an event and someone comes over to me and says, "Oh my gosh, I just heard about you. I'm so interested in your fund. Can you tell me about it?" I'm going to give them the 2 minute pitch. I'm going to do it right there then, and because that's where the demand is the highest. They literally drove an hour, came to an event, parked in the cold, walked inside, sat around for 30, 45 minutes waiting to have a chance to talk to me, I'm not going to say, oh, well, just hop on a call with me next week. No, the demand is highest right then. And that's the time where you pitch, right? We're trying to get all of the demand built up to where by the time you're following up, it's like the only way for that tension that you've created to be released is by hopping on a call and learning about your fund. But if they're ready earlier, let them skip the line or skip the steps and go straight to a pitch. But if I'm in a room of 60 people and I'm a host, I'm not going to spend 20 minutes talking with one person either. And they kind of know that as well. So you should have multiple pitches. One is your kind of social pitch of like if you're at a networking event, it's a low leverage one. You're not the host, you're not in charge of or in control of the dynamics of the event. Have a 30-second version of who you are and what you're up to that people can grab onto something and then start a conversation around if they want to learn more, they can talk about that. So what that looks like, this is my friend Daniel Priestley's fork for a social pitch. He calls it name, same, fame, pain, aim, game. I think is so they all rhyme. If you just Google Daniel Priestley social pitch, you'll find a video of him explaining this in more detail. But what it looks like is my name's Daren Smith. I'm the founder of Craftsman Films. That's name. Same. I'm an indie film producer based in Provo, Utah, and I've done 4 movies over the last 4 years. 2 of them were in theaters at the same time last year, which is like the highlight of my career so far. It's very rare for an indie film producer to have a movie in theaters, let alone 2. So that's same is I'm an indie film producer. That means it's something that they understand. I'm not saying I'm a line producer because they don't know what that is. I'm not saying I'm a UPM or an associate producer because those are words they don't get. But indie film producer is pretty common parlance. And they can go, oh, he's an indie film producer. I know what that is. Fame is like, what's something you've done that's impressive? 2 movies in theaters last year at the same time. And then I kind of give that extra line of, most indie film producers are lucky to get 1 in theaters. I had 2 at the same time, so I feel really lucky about that. I just kind of emphasize that that's really impressive. They should pay attention to that, or that I'm an impressive person. Pain is an optional one. You could say, I've been really focused on how frustratingly bad the indie film world is, and the existing model is so broken. And so what I'm currently doing is raising a film fund to do the next 10 movies. And the long-term game is to build a new model and get it out into the world because I think it makes the industry better. It's better for the audience, better for the investors, better for the filmmakers, better for everybody. And so that's the long-term game, is to really change the model that we use to invest in and produce indie films. So if you compress all of that without the explanation into 30 seconds, there's 2 or 3 things in there that are really like easy hooks for them to grab onto and to continue the conversation. Now, there are times where I say that and people go, oh, it's super cool. So I do this. And then they're back to them or they're talking to someone else and it didn't land. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you did a bad job. It just means there was nothing that they wanted to grab onto. And that's totally fine. But it's almost like a service that you're giving to somebody to say, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I've done. This is what I'm up to. This is the long-term game. There's 4 or 5 ways that they can continue the conversation. You made it really easy for them, and they're going to go, man, that was really so nice talking to that guy because I totally know who he is, and et cetera, or who she is, whatever it may be. So social pitch is key, like name, same, fame, pain, aim, game. Like that's the framework for it, and practice that and get it under your breath so you can say it in 30 seconds at networking events. That's the low leverage end of the spectrum. When you get to the high leverage control end of the spectrum, that's when you've got one-on-one on a Zoom call or over lunch, and with the explicit intent to pitch the thing that you're pitching, your film or your fund. And so they know that they're coming to a lunch to hear a pitch, and you know that you're going to lunch to deliver a pitch. So in that situation, it's like a scheduled pitch. And so that's where you can have kind of your long form 20-minute or less presentation with slides or with materials, or it's something that you've practiced and rehearsed and you kind of know how to walk people through the investment opportunity. And again, frame it as an investment opportunity, not as a creative project, like we were saying earlier. But anywhere in between, I have some version of between a 30-second and a 20-minute version of the pitch to be able to have the conversation whenever they're ready for it.
That's fantastic. I love that. I mean, I love, again, systems, frameworks,
Yep.
the different words that are, I mean,
I told you I'm like an architect systems builder, man. Like this is my life.
and I love, I mean, and again, I mean, that's the process. That's what it takes. And,
Can I
yeah,
really quick
please.
though? I do think
Yes.
it's important for people to realize that this works for me. I
Yeah.
understand how my brain works, and I'm very systematic and very regimented. I like systems, I like frameworks, I like certainty. And the way to get to certainty is to build a system and keep doing more of what works and less of what doesn't until you get the outcome you want. That's my mindset that works for my brain. If that feels like resistance to you, maybe you're different than me. There's a slight chance that you're different than me, right? And so going into like figuring out your personality type, figuring out what works for you, what kind of structure or lack of structure, what kind of process or lack of process, what kind of frameworks or lack of frameworks are going to work for you, and build your own system. And don't, if systems are icky to you, call it something else. Call it progress fun time or whatever you want to call it, so that it feels colorful and flowy and all that stuff, which is not how I work. But if you come away from this conversation going, "Oh, I'm not looking forward to building this thing that Daren's built because that feels totally out of alignment with my values and how I work," that's not what I'm saying you should do. I'm very clearly saying you should do what works for you. And yes, that takes time to figure it out and to build whatever process works for you. But I do think it's important to have a process and to be able to see if it's working or not, because then you can optimize and make it better over time until it works.
Yeah. I'm really glad you made that point. I mean, it is so important. I mean, everyone's different. They have their own system and they have their own processes, like you said. And so, of course, I mean, the last thing you want someone to do is watch us and say, well, I can't do all of that. And then they kind of
Right.
just, there's all this friction, like, I'm just not doing it. So, yeah, I mean, and, so much too is about doing, I mean, do by learning. I love the lean learning, that kind of methodology too. It's just like you could
Yeah.
learn, you can listen to podcasts and you can read and do all these things, but so much also is just by doing it. And then inherently through that process, you will figure out your workflows and your systems and all those things. All right.
Yeah.
So I think I want to kind of leave this with the kind of final question here. We can kind of, maybe we can see what goes with it too. But so this feels like a long process to get, to get from that first kind of just inviting them to an event or going to an event, and then you have your follow-ups and whatnot. How long would you say on average does it go from that first kind of, they are at an event I host or I go to an event, I have a conversation with them or I reach out via LinkedIn, to they are ready to for real commit? What is that?
Mm.
What would you say that process is? Because I'm guessing that's also part of your systems, because you maybe now you have an average, and okay, this is the average to get there. So now I know I need to reach out to this many people within the year or whatever to get to that amount. So what would you say in that whole process is the length of time it takes from hello to here's my money?
If I were to try to average it, I'd say 3 months. That feels like an average amount, but because it's a system, it's a flywheel. It incorporates everything from, social media posts and blogs and podcasts all the way to events to, one-on-one pitch meetings and lunches and stuff like that. So that's a big spectrum. But what I've experienced things on both sides. So I've experienced where someone hopped on my calendar because they clicked on a link on my site to schedule an intro call about Producer Fund One. And they got on the call. They said, hi, my name's, let's call him Jake. My name's Jake. LinkedIn kept putting your stuff in front of me on my feed. I clicked over to your site and read a couple of things, and I was really impressed with the vision and the values that you're talking about. I really want to be a part of your fund. How do I invest? And I said, awesome. My name's Daren. It's nice to meet you. Like that was his first 30 seconds. And like that's rare, but it's happened a couple of times where all of the other work that I'm doing to like build a personal brand and talk about the fund all the time and talk about movies and shine a light on the indie film models, that generates interest as well. So 30 seconds. But on the other end, you have people that are 6 to 12 months and you're following up with them. There's an investor that I invited to the event in January, and he's like, he was gonna come, and then an hour before he texts and it's like, hey, I can't make it to Park City tonight. I'm sorry. I wish I could be there. It's like, great, no worries. I'll follow up with you in a week or two. Followed up, followed up, followed up. 2 months later, he finally responds to a text. Daren, I'm so sorry. It's just been hectic. I'm like, no worries at all. Are you free right now? We can hop on a call. Yeah. Talk for 20 minutes. And his whole thing was, it's not a good time. Call me in 6 months. Great. No problem. 6 months later, call him again. Hey, Daren. Yeah, it's just as crazy as it was. I'm overcommitted. I'm blah, 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 blah. Call me in January. Okay, cool. No worries. But this is a guy that like has a big profile and has a lot of awareness and would be a huge get for the fund. And so there's a lot of alignment there, and there's reasons for me to keep following up, even though he hasn't said no. He keeps saying follow up in 6 months, follow up in 6 months. But at some point, he's going to run out of time. And then the table kind of shifts where right now it's he to be an investor in the fund. At some point, I'm going to raise the entire amount without his help, and he'll call me or I'll call him and follow up. And he'll be like, yeah, so tell me about it. Well, fund one is closed. We closed it back in January. And he's going to go, oh man, okay, I missed it. Well, maybe I should take this more seriously next time or whatever it is. So I think it's a matter of not trying to optimize for how do I get people to do it faster, but let people go at their own pace. Some of my best investors, it took 2 to 3 months just in conversation. And it wasn't because they needed convincing. It was just because that's the pace that they like to do deals. They don't want to do a deal in 2 days or 2 weeks because they need more time with you. I had 3 coffee meetings with one investor before they invested, but it was talk for an hour and get to know each other and build rapport and talk about our families and our lives. Because for him, he needed to feel like this is a person I want to invest in. Okay, great. So you've got to build in time for that. I should also say, I'm doing this full time. This is my job right now, is raising money. And it's a job that doesn't pay very well because I'm raising money, not spending money. So I'm in a privileged position. My wife works full time. I can throw an email out and do a retreat with 12 people at Sundance for 3 days. That brought in a couple $1,000, and I was able to pay for my business for this month. Like I could do a consulting call and that pays for 3 weeks of my business expenses, right? So I'm in a privileged position, but it's also because I've spent 10, 12 years building to the point where I have that sort of leverage, whether it's through my email or through my LinkedIn presence and audience, to go, well, I can pay the bills still, but 80% of my time every week is raising money. And so I know not everybody can do that. And if you're someone who's got a 9 to 5 and a family and other commitments with sports or church or men's groups or women's groups or whatever, and you're like, how am I going to do this in 5 hours a week or less? It's going to be really hard. You have to be hyper focused during the hours that you do have. B, it's going to take longer because if I'm spending 30 plus hours a week raising money and you're spending 3, I'm going to go 10 times faster than you. That's just, math. So you got to be okay with it taking longer. And you need to find the leverage even more so than I've done, right? I'm talking about the leverage of like inviting 30 people to a thing and getting 10 and following up with the other 20. And, that's a lot of leverage, meaning I can put an event together and get 30 investors conversations started. How are you going to get 30 investor conversations started if you only have 3 hours a week? Maybe it's events, maybe it's a dinner, maybe it's a monthly lunch that you host or whatever. But if you can talk to 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 people in an hour compared to one person for an hour, that's leverage of your time. So I don't know where we were going with that question,
Yeah.
but I mean, how long does it take? As long as it
Yeah.
takes. Like,
As
I
long as
think
it takes, yeah.
the mindset has to be, I'm going to do this for as long as it takes until I get the thing that I want. Too many people give up 2 inches from striking gold, right? It's that story of like the guy who was digging, 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 and then was like a foot away from a spine or whatever, a vein of gold that could have been, life changing. So don't have an end in mind. Don't say I'm going to do this for 3 months, and if it doesn't work, I'm giving up, or if it's 6 months or 12 months. But my poor wife, wanted me to do that. Like, how much time are you going to commit to this? I said, until I've raised the fund. Like, what do you mean? How much time? Like, until I have it. And so far, it's been like 8 months. And, I've had to add in retreats and more consulting and more revenue because I can't just not work and not bring in revenue for 8 months. We're not in that position. So, but you just keep going until you have it. That's the mindset.
I love that. There's a lot of great things. I feel like we could just go off to a whole another conversation with that.
Yeah.
I mean, but I love that you just do whatever it takes. I mean, even if it's like, yeah, if you have the 9 to 5, you stick with your 9 to 5. If you don't have a 9 to 5, you got to work part-time at somewhere else. Do it. Do whatever it takes. Do a random coaching call, do a something, whatever experience. But also there's something you have that I think, and I'm a huge advocate of this, that I think anyone can do, and it doesn't have to be at a large scale. But we met because we both post on LinkedIn. You've got
Yeah.
10,000 followers. I have 31,000 followers. And it just came, and I've only been doing it like not even 2 years yet. And it just from just posting and talking, and not about me. Like I share either what I know or what I'm
Yeah.
learning in these conversations I have. And so and I think that is such a great way to pull people in. Now, both you and I had been posting daily, pretty much, and and so no one has to again, commit to what you can, but you do, but a heck of a lot more than me. And I'd like to just talk about that for a second outside of the fun, but like you have your newsletter, you have a podcast, you have your
Yeah.
book, you also do these, I know you do these retreats with people, which again is, is like education and sharing. And then you do post on LinkedIn. I just post on LinkedIn and have my weekly newsletter. And even then I'm not 100% on top of it, but you are very prolific. And so I kind of want to talk. One, tell us kind of where to find all these things and what it is that what it is you do, and then how it helps with this process. And just if you could, and even just kind of a little bit of advice on like how someone could just dip their toes into any of those areas.
Yeah. Well, the one place I would recommend people go is craftsmanfilms.co/join. That's get on my email list. You'll see all the stuff. It's pre-built. You're going to get my best content. You're going to get weekly newsletter. You're going to get access to everything. And then from there, you can explore the site. And there's dozens of posts about every aspect of producing and investing in indie film. I really set up the site to be the place on the internet for if a filmmaker, well, let's say an investor wants to learn how to invest in indie film profitably, I'm the place for that. That was really the goal. The expanded impact is for filmmakers to say, oh, this is how Daren's doing it, and I can learn from that. Just like listening to this conversation, they can hear how I'm doing things, and they go, oh, I want to try that. I think that might work for what I'm doing. So craftsmanfilms.co/join, and then yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Daren Smith. So how to do it? Systems. Go figure, right? Like it has to be systems. There's no way I could be spending 5, 10 hours a week on social posts and content. Like that's not sustainable, and it's not the leverage. That's not where the leverage is. But there's a flywheel effect there where if you can build a personal brand, you can exert a lot of leverage once you have it. And I'm sure you've seen this with I mean, your audience is 3 times my size. And I'm sure you've seen like you could have a single post turn into an investor or into a new customer or a new client or whatever it might be. I was able to turn my 3,500 people on my email list and 10,000-ish on LinkedIn into 12 people who spend a little under $3,000 to come to a retreat for 3 days. Like, okay, well, that's some leverage. Like, if I can write words on the internet and that turns into $30,000 in 2 weeks, like, that's pretty cool. I didn't make 30,000. Sundance made 20 of that, like there's expenses involved. But I digress. The system is there's core content, and then there are offshoots of that. Justin Welsh is a friend who's got a huge, massive LinkedIn following, and he calls it the hub and spoke model. So, I talk a lot about frameworks and systems. I love stealing ones that have already been proven. And Justin has, I don't know, 600,000 followers on LinkedIn and has made $10.5 million over the last couple of years selling products to that audience. he's got a model that's been stress tested. So the hub and spoke model, let's just quickly use that as because that's the framework that I use. Every week ish, I write a blog post or an essay or some sort of long form piece of content. It's usually something that I'm thinking of that's top of mind. I've done a few series where it's like I did a series called The Fourth Turning for Filmmakers, which is kind of based off of the book The Fourth Turning and this crazy, chaotic, uncertain time that we're in. And how do you survive that and thrive in it as a filmmaker? So I kind of applied his book and his principles and ideas to the specific life of a filmmaker and a film investor. So there's a whole series of like 9 or 10 posts that are connected, almost like a mini book. But I try to get at least one post out every week. I do have a writing practice. So in the morning, about an hour to an hour and a half, I just enjoy writing. It helps me think, it helps me process, and sometimes that turns into public facing uh, output or content. And so every week I spend, a few hours writing, and I spend an hour a week on a podcast that my friend Garrett and I co-host. It's called Truly Independent, which is the subtitle is Demystifying the Indie Film Journey. So it's part documentary, part interview show where we're just literally documenting their process of making, releasing, producing indie films. And it's a really cool look. We get a lot of people saying no one else talks like this about indie film. It's all theory. It's all hypothesis. It's like you guys are just sharing what you did last week and whether it worked or not, and it's pretty amazing. So people enjoy that a lot. We're in season 3. We just crossed over a year of weekly releases, so that's a good show to check out. But those hub pieces, the hubs of the long form content, really easily turns into short form content. So you can take, I mean, I built a little GPT or chat GPT little thing that basically I say, here's my post, give me 5 spokes. And it takes it and it knows what a spoke is based on Justin Welsh's framework. And it goes, okay, well, here's one that's more contrarian. Here's one that's more educational. Here's one that's more of a list. And it just takes my long form essay and generates in my voice, because I've fed it my book, I've fed it a whole bunch of podcast transcripts, I've fed it a whole bunch of essays. It knows what I sound like. So I give it the long form post, and in 30 seconds, I have 5 posts that I can then schedule using a tool called Typefully, which is what I use to schedule posts on LinkedIn. And I'll tweak the wording and I'll delete the M dashes and the other stuff that makes it look like a chat GPT output. But it works. Each one of those posts will get 500 to 1,000 impressions, and over the course of a week, it turns into 10 to 20,000 impressions a week, and that's enough. I'm not looking to be an influencer. Most of my growth on LinkedIn is me doing the outreach of 200 investors or partner people a week, and that's where my growth and following comes from. I kind of don't care, not that I don't care about people, but the difference for me between 10,000 followers and 100,000 followers doesn't matter if those 100,000 followers are just randos on the internet. I'd much rather have 500 investors on an email list, 100,000 people, filmmakers on on a social media platform. So I'm optimizing everything I do is how do I get investors to know that I exist and then get them on my email list so that I can engage with them for longer, ideally 3 months or more, because that's how long it'll take, so that more and more and more investors interested in my fund. So it's a long game of, yeah, I've got about 300-400 people on a spreadsheet or an email segment right now that are investor people. Okay, what does it look like if I have 3 or 4,000 or 30 or 40,000? I don't know how big that list is going to get, but I guarantee if I have a few thousand investors on an email list, it's not going to be terribly hard to raise fund number 2 in a couple of years. That might, at that point, will be a 25 or a $50 million fund instead of a $10 million fund. So that's how to do that. And the reason for it is because of the long-term play. It's the only way that all of that is going to end up working is because this daily input, this daily process of writing and publishing and speaking and podcasting and publishing, that compounds over time. And at some point, you can then put out a LinkedIn post or send out an email and say, I'm raising $25 million. click here to express your interest, and you can get a few $1 million worth of expressed interest from the people you built over the previous 3, 4, 5 years. So that's why I do it. That's why I'm prolific, because I think there's a lot of leverage in being what, again, my friend Dan Priestley calls a key person of influence. If you can become that for the right group of people, there's a ton of leverage there. And that's every system works better if there's a lot of leverage.
Oh, I love it. That's fantastic. I mean, I love that so much. And I think what's important to take away too is that, I mean, anyone who's just watching too and just like, oh, like I'm just starting this process, like find the little pieces, find the one thing. It could even be like just do a podcast or write a blog or whatever. And like I like what you said too, which is super important. And I see it the same way as like, not trying to be an influencer. Like you're not trying to collect followers just for the sake of collecting followers. Like the goal is that you're trying to hopefully align with the right people. That I want people that follow me to be like, okay, you are aligned with what I'm trying to, you know, share here and what I'm trying to, what the stages of my processes are. So I
Yeah.
think that's so important too. It's not doing it just for the sake of like, oh, I hope I collect a bunch, because if I get 100,000 followers, then I'm going to, I could easily get, $10 million worth of investors. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe none of those people will ever move from a follower to an investor. So
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's so important that if you're going to use social media, that in a way in your system, that you do it in a way that makes sense, and don't worry about follower counts or things like that. Just all that matters, like what's that little drop in the bucket every day that I'm doing that will hopefully give me that right person or that right movement to what I want.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you've experienced this. I just want to say real quick is that you
Yeah.
also like you have an idea of what you want, but you don't even know what's gonna like you said, you got a random message from someone who's like, "Hey, I saw your stuff. I'd like to invest." And you didn't even reach out to this person. So that's the other great thing is you never know what will come your way, and that's one thing I really love about using social media, especially like LinkedIn, is that I've had so many wonderful messages come and with opportunities that I did not even expect would happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. So I want to kind of end with, if you have heard this whole conversation, you're here at the end, like, what do you do with this? Well, I think it goes back to this idea of like high leverage or control and low leverage or control. So let's put all of this stuff on that spectrum. I would not start with social media and expect results immediately, right? That's very low leverage, low control. You don't have any ability to say who sees your post, who engages with them, who interacts. It's 100% on their agency, depending on whether they get in touch or whether they become an investor, right? So on the other far end of the spectrum, you have one-to-one personal conversations with the exact right person that fits the profile of the type of investor you want for your movie or your fund. So I would start there, like start super high leverage, and then use the results you're getting to then add on the low leverage stuff. So if you have a conversation with an investor and they ask one or two questions, then take those one or two questions and go answer them on social media. And you got two for one at that point. You use the high leverage stuff to generate the low leverage stuff, and you just start there. But if you're just doing social media, but you're not doing any one-on-one outreach, you're not creating any events which are one to many, or you're not doing webinars or podcasts or things where you can reach more people at once, then it's going to take forever to do the social media strategy only. I would say start one on one or one to many, create events, create one on one meetings or lunches, like reach out to people directly and say, this is what I'm working on. I'd love to have a conversation if you to see if there's a fit. Start there and use all of your available time on that, because you're going to get way more leverage from one to one conversations than from posting on social media. And then add the social media stuff as a layer on top of it if and when you can. And if you're able to do it, I mean, I think daily is kind of minimum, but at least once a week you should be present online, because it takes so many touches for people to know that you exist and to know that what you're up to. It's not going to be the first time they see you that they call you and then they click to your website and then they read again and then they get on your email list and then they call you. So that's where I would start. If you're like, don't leave this conversation today and without going, here's a great question I want to leave people with. And this is a great way to start the building your own system, your own process for raising money. If you had to raise all of the money for your film in the next 20 minutes, who would you call? And that's the start of your list. Go to them first, reach out. I had a girl that did this. She actually ended up coming to the retreat a few weeks ago, but we did a consulting call. And I left the call with that question. And I said, if you had to raise the whole money for your documentary project in 20 minutes, who would you call? She got off that call and later that day had to hop on a plane to India because she was going out there to film parts of the documentary. On the email or on the flight, she emailed three people that came to mind when she said, when she asked the question, who would I call if I had to raise it in 20 minutes? By the time she landed, two out of the three people had replied positively. And by the end of that week, one of them gave her a bunch of money to help keep the documentary going. So start with the highest leverage activities, which is that a great question to spark. What's the highest leverage person that you can reach out to? Is who would you call if you only had 20 minutes to raise all the money for your movie? Start there.
Fantastic. Amazing advice. Daren, appreciate this so much. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thanks, man.
I wish we could have spent 3 hours, 5 hours
Next
just
time.
talking and diving in next
I
time.
don't think our time zones allow for a 3 or 5 hour conversation.
But I will make sure that if you don't follow Daren and follow his newsletter and all those good things, make sure you do that.